This is the Tabernacle Podcast with Heidi Burgess, Rachel Vore, and me, John Vermilia. How's it going, ladies?
Good. It's a good day to be here.
Good day to be here.
Yes.
It's cold, wet, and rainy outside.
It's warm and cozy in here.
So you'd rather be in the dungeon recording a podcast. You know, this is something that people fear, being on this podcast. We talked about that before we started recording. Yes. And I appreciate both of you for a lot of reasons. And so we'll just start with all the reasons I appreciate you. Number one, Heidi Burgess, if you don't know, she's the wife of Tim Burgess. She's been a pastor's wife for 17 years. 17 years. You've been the women's ministry director. You've had various leadership roles in running retreats. I think you produced the first ever women's retreat we had here. You are a licensed therapist, counselor. Yes.
Limited license.
Limited license.
Yes.
Not in my eyes.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. A mother, a mom, I guess we should just say a mom, right? Rachel Vore, also a mom, also a women's director of ministry here at the Buckley campus. Yes. And you've been on the podcast before.
One time. Yep.
Yeah, one time. You both have.
Yeah.
At least a couple times. So
time too.
We are fired up to have you. Oh, here, by way of introduction to our Tab family. Today, we're looking at questions women ask, and this will be part one. And Britt and I have been talking about the fact that most of the questions are really deep. Not all of them are women-specific, so if you're a dude, don't tune out, because a lot of these are just Christian-specific, and some of them, if you're a husband, father, used to be a husband, want to be a husband, a son, you might want to better understand the heart of a woman. And who better to learn from? Both of you, in my opinion, godly women who love the Lord, who love His Word, involved at your church, love your husbands, love your children. I have learned from both of you. And that's important to say publicly on recording. You have both taught me. And because there's a lot of dudes out there, and we're not going to jump into that first, but there's a lot of dudes out there who misunderstand what the Bible says about the roles of men and women. And they're like, well, I have nothing to learn from a woman. Well, you're an idiot. Yeah, and probably a bad husband and father, right? I have learned so much from you, and you have taught me. And so I appreciate your leadership, and thank you for being on today for part one. So you fired up at all?
I am. And I would just say to that guy, maybe you're not an idiot, but keep asking questions, keep learning, be open-minded, and God will open your eyes.
See, that was a sweet way of putting it. I'm going to stick to my guns because I'm a dude and say he's an idiot.
You can say that, yes.
Yeah. A lot of men don't understand the mind of a woman, so just listen up.
Listen up.
Yeah. Ooh,
listen up. Sweet. Well, we have a lot of questions, and like I said, some of them are women-specific. The first question we're going to jump into is because there's no holds barred. Right. So we agreed we were going to kind of take them in order. But because some of the women-specific questions don't happen until page 2 of my 2 1/3 pages here of questions, we may jump around a little bit. But let's just get right to the heart of the matter. This is these are questions that, Rachel, you actually, I guess we'd say, culled or collected from women that attend women's Bible studies.
Yeah, some of them also were phone calls or phone conversations and stuff like that too, but most of it was through Bible studies.
Outstanding.
So,
yeah. And just to show you the difference between men and women, I asked Martin Rizzi to collect the man questions, and I got 38 or 40 note cards with various amounts of chicken scratch. From Rachel, I got 36 questions typed, spaced properly, numbered, and spelling corrections made. Yes. And I was like, yes, outstanding. That's one less step in the so thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So question number one, and I'm going to ask both of you, we'll shoot it to Heidi first, is what does it mean to be a submissive wife according to the Bible? And it says Bible only, but I assume just according to the Bible. What's it mean to be a submissive wife?
Okay, so for me, if you listen to the first podcast I was on, I talked about my journey with submission. And so if you didn't go back and listen to that, I don't know what number it was. But I have to start to have a perspective of submission that doesn't make me defensive. I need to start in Genesis 1:26. God created them male and female, and he gave them dominion. He set them to rule over creation. So at that point, men and women are equal. In Genesis 2, God goes on to say, here's your role in that. It's not good for man to be alone. It said he didn't have someone comparable to him, not the same, but someone comparable to him. So it was not good for him to be alone. He couldn't do his job the way God wanted him to do it without woman. So woman's created out of a living being thing. Man was created out of dust. Now it says we all return to dust, so that doesn't make us better. It just makes us different. But we're ivory.
Well played.
Well played. And
if you don't know what we're talking about, she's referring to the rib.
yes.
They're made out of, because the woman was made out of a rib taken from the man. So I like what you just did there.
Yes.
Yeah, we're made out of ivory. Well played. And man's made out of dirt.
And man's made out of dirt. And God has reasonable expectations of dust.
Yes.
Whether it's ivory dust or dust.
Yeah.
So then in that, so often the definition helpmate that's used in Genesis 2 doesn't really reflect what that is. So that actual word is used only once regarding mankind and every other time regarding God as helper and supporter. And so the definition we've kind of used in our women's ministry after study, we didn't just make it up, is warrior princess.
Right.
That is who Eve was designed to be.
Right. And so we say that just to flesh that out. The warrior part is because every other, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but we really, like you helped me hammer this out. You and my wife, Darcy, helped me hammer this out when we did the Ruth series years ago, which I don't think is still available. But the word is Ezer or Ezer, E-Z-E-R. And every other time it's referenced in the Bible is in a reference to God. And it's usually in God is going to be an ally to Israel against their enemies.
Yeah.
And so that was the warrior part. And the princess part, it's a daughter of God.
Right.
Right? That's
the
royalty.
Most High King.
Yes, exactly.
So that's what makes us royal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep going. Yeah.
Yes. And so we're created, but we're created with a role. So it's equal. Both roles are important, but they're different. And so then that was really important to me to figure out in a world that tells me women are not good. Like the message I was overcoming in my childhood and all of that, patriarchal societies, none of that was God's plan. That's just how the world rolled out.
Yeah, so women aren't good. Women are less than. Women can't be leaders. Women can't be trusted to lead. And if we dive into it even more, women are easily deceived, which is not what the Bible says either.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this question, well, I know this question is probably coming from Ephesians chapter 5.
Yes.
Where it says, starting in verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. The problem is we forget the verse right before that,
right.
which is
to one another.
Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Right.
Yeah. So it isn't about, I don't think what you're saying, it's about your role, and it's not about this blind submission, or as Tim would say, this, hey, woman, beer me.
Yes.
While I sit in an easy chair and watch the game. That's not what we're talking about, right?
No.
Well, you bring it back to the garden. So we talked about women being the Ezer, right? And then the second part of that is the kenegdo. I'm saying I'm butchering it, but it's in likeness of. And so the best picture illustration of that is you look at the wings of a bird. They are the same but opposite of each other. And the whole purpose of it is for the flight of the body of the bird. And so we were created to be Adam's helpmate. Adam was created to what? To work in the garden. We were created from Adam to be his helpmate, not to come and wave a fan over him, feed him grapes, but to work alongside of him in the garden. So I think if we come back to the basis of why we were created was to work in the garden for the glory of God. But we do it together, and we do it that we are the same, we are but opposite. And there's and equality. We are made in the likeness of God and in his image. But I think society and the adversary and the way that the world is going, it's done a disservice to women of somehow, if you're not the same, then for you to be considered equal, that means you have to be the same. I will never be the same as a man. I wasn't created to be a man. And if I tried to be a man, I would be a very, very terrible man. But I was created to be a woman. And that isn't less than, but God has created us. You talked about the woman, the warrior princess. We are women of valor.
Yeah.
And but we are here to do our role as what God has placed over us.
Yeah. And I like that image of the wings of the bird, because then it isn't limited only in marriage, but it's women and men lifting the body of Christ.
Oh, good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that Ephesians verse coming back, I'm glad that you started with the main verse in there. Like we talked about in the last one, Ephesians 5 is all about love and how to love well, but it's restoring the order of the garden. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Right.
Is what Adam and Eve were called to do.
Right.
Right. And if I was exactly like my Adam, we would never remember to eat.
That's right.
So one of my roles as his Eve is to feed him.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
If it wasn't for my Eve, I probably wouldn't leave the house. Right. But if I play that out further, there wouldn't be a house, right? Because I wouldn't know where the mortgage payment is, who we pay it to, and wouldn't have a job and wouldn't see people. I would be a hermit living in a cave. And so that's actually a beautiful picture that you need both in order for that marriage, for that union, or as you're saying, that church or even that organization to fly. And culture just plays tricks on us. Let's talk about practically and tactically. Like where the rubber meets the road. You're married to Tim, manly man. You're married to Bo, legendary manly man, right? Everyone in Northern Michigan seems to know Bo. How does that play out? Because I know it hasn't been, or I'm guessing, I think I know, that it hasn't been always that easy. And for you, Heidi, when you were kind of awakening in your spiritual journey at a faster pace than Tim was, and both of you both you and Bo, very strong personalities, in a good way, right? That can accomplish so much. How's that played out practically? Just like for the wife, that's like, we don't know what situation the asker is in. Is he a passive man? Is he an overly dominant man? Just what's that look like?
Go ahead.
Yeah, first I have to just say I'm probably one of the biggest hypocrites because I've done this well and I've done this very, very poorly.
Well, that's why you're on the podcast, because we want to hear it all.
Yes. And so I think the beginning of it has to begin with love. And I think it's important to look at Bo to see him for who he is, who God created him to be, the potential of what God can do through him. Instead of seeing what he's done, what he hasn't done, if he said something just a little off color or anything like that, just to actually just see him for who he is, and let love be at the base of it. And I think that that's important because then when there are things that are hard, I can trust him as the leader of the house. And so, practically speaking, if I have to, because I know that Bo loves Jesus and I know that Bo loves me, that I know that I can trust him. And there has been times where I have been very, very, very against some of the directions that he's like, I really feel like we're supposed to be led this way. But that is where I have to put my trust into Jesus Christ and said, okay, like this is the man that you've called to be the leader of our house. Bo has allowed me to have space to let him know if I don't like something. I don't want to be that woman that's like, don't put it out with your boots, Ted. Like, I don't want to be that woman, where I'm always complaining. But he's made a space where I can bring my concerns to him. I can bring, hey, did we think about it this way? Or could we maybe look at it doing it this way? And I think biblically speaking, that was a beautiful way. Even Jesus in the garden, hey, if this can pass, please let it be so. But if not, then thy will be done, right? So Bo has created a space that I could be who I am. He'll listen and take into consideration the things. But the way that we have grown together, I have been able to trust him of like, I know that you're not a perfect man, but you are doing your best to follow the perfect man. So I can humble myself and submit myself to these hard decisions, because I think leadership and being the head of the house is, as much as we think that this is like a glorified position, it is a hard position. And there's just so much pressure on our husbands, and some do it well, some don't do it well. It's a cycle of learning for them. And so to give them grace and to encourage them, Bo would never be able to grow as a man if I'm continuously speaking ill over him or speaking death over him or telling him how he messed up again, or that it's just to see him for who he is, who God's created him to be, and then support him in the way that God is calling him as, and Bo takes care of me as God has called him to do. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that there's a space for you to speak. And I would say to any man who doesn't listen to his wife, he's probably a fool. That doesn't mean listen to your wife, that you always, like if God's leading you in a direction, your wife says go somewhere else or do a different thing, well, then you're a fool to listen to your wife. Well, I'm talking about generally speaking, if you're not taking into an account what your wife thinks, because generally, it's my opinion, women tend to be smarter about a lot of these issues, especially with discernment. My wife's radar is incredible. I know both of you have incredible radar. You've both saved me from things. You've told me, that situation, that person is dangerous. You've said, no, don't go there. And I've tried to listen, even though you're not, you're not my Eve, neither one of you. But a man is wise if he listens. And the scripture tells the man in that same passage later on that he should cherish his wife, that he should love his wife. And part of my submission to God is to listen to her fears, listen to her discernment, So it is a frightening thing. I'm verifying that when my wife and I have two different minds on an issue, when she says to me, well, I guess it's your call. And then I'm like, oh, crap. I don't want it to be my call, because the default position of a man is passivity. Like our first father, Adam, is I would rather not take responsibility. So I just want to jump in there. Heidi, for you, do you have any more thoughts on what it looks like practically?
Well, yeah, I think Rachel's example was beautiful for couples that enter or are growing their relationship equally committed to Christ. And that wasn't where we started. And so I would say the example in my life is our move from Arizona to Michigan was more like I'm driving the bus and Tim just got on because it was moving. And that's where the food is, right? But then then my maturity to let go of control. It's not lead, because you gave Tim a book once called Leading from the Second Chair. And I believe that's where I'm called, right? If it's my strength, then I lead there and he gives feedback. But if it's his strength, then he leads and I give feedback. But ultimately, if there's a stalemate, then it's on him. And I understand now how scary that is. Our move to Buckley, in that time, I recognized where we had common goals, and we had done a Larry Burkett financial thing, and so we were committed to debt-free. We didn't make it, but we were committed. And that and tithing and things like that. And Tim shared, his resolve in that is, I can be committed to tithing, but I can't write the check with a glad heart. So
I remember that story.
So then I would write the check, and then at the end we celebrate. This is how much money we were able to give this year, and he could get in on the celebration. When we moved to Buckley, the goal was, one, his dream was always to build a house, And I had enough trust to move into a camper in a garage that he would be able to fulfill that. I didn't have that when we were married at first. I wouldn't have trusted him to move into an empty plot of land. And then to become debt-free. That was the goal. The beautiful things that happened in that, the plan was I was going to work part-time and he was going to have the kids and build the house. And after 2 days of that, he came to me and he said, I can't do this without you. I need you. You complete me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have to say another nice thing to me for 3 years. That was the best thing you've ever said to me. And so
Tim Burgess, yes, Casanova.
Yeah. Although that was not a Casanova face. It was a desperate face.
It was a desperate face.
Save me from what have I done, right? And so then to submit to him then was to lean into, no, you can do this. We can do this together. You don't have to do it alone. Even though my job was often standing at the bottom of the ladder waiting for him to need a tool. When I could have gone to sweep up or organize the next project or whatever, whenever I did that, he was frustrated because he sometimes literally needed me beneath his wing to feel strong. That was my journey of learning to submit and seeing it work. It meant I had to get out of the way between him and God, because we've talked about no one comes to the Father that he hasn't called.
Right.
And I was a pretty effective reflector, or at least complicit in the ignoring the call, because I was intercepting it, translating, making it attractive, and then...
Instead of letting him bleed a little bit.
Instead of submitting.
Yeah,
out of reverence for Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't care if we don't get to another question today.
Okay.
Because there's so many questions. Let me put it to you this way. Is there a time when it is right and biblical and God-honoring in an area on a specific issue for a woman to take responsibility, well, not take responsibility, to lead or to assume control of something? Like, at what point is it like, okay, he's failing, and in order for me to honor Christ, I need to take leadership in this area?
I think yes. And before I did that, I would have to check my motive. Am I manipulating? Am I looking for a grasp of power? Or am I looking to support my husband in this? I think of times of illness or failing function. You know, my dad was ill for 2 years before he passed with cancer. And so my mom stepped up and took care of a lot of things that my dad used to. But none of that dishonored him as the head of our household.
Or maybe I'm just thinking, like, to the wife who has an unbelieving husband, or he's being spiritually delinquent. So he's a Christian, but he doesn't have time for church. He doesn't have time for the kids to take them to Foundry. And is it right for a woman to say, well, then I'm going. I'm taking the kids. I'm stepping up. Or should she say, well, my husband doesn't want to go, so we're all going to suffer? Sorry, I'm really pressing in on this because there's so many Michigan women.
I think our first loyalty is to Christ. And so because that is where we're running to, and that is after this life and after the marriage here on earth, we're going to be married to Christ, or as his bride, right? And so I think our first loyalty is to that, and I think there's a way that you can be respectful about it. You don't have to belittle him for not believing. Meet him where he's at, pray for him, but to step into that spiritual authority of knowing the long-term effects of feeding your soul, you know, and advocating for your children to know the Lord as well.
Yeah, I think that's a key word, advocating for your children. Because so if I had the look on my face that you did when you said that, well, I'm going. Yeah. My motive is I'm driving the bus.
Yeah.
Right? But
driving the church bus.
Exactly. But when my motive is I'm advocating for these people that God's given me mutual care over, our children. That's what I did. That's so the way I kind of looked at it for us is 8 to 5 when he's at work, I'm in charge of the house. And so if we did a VBS or we did, something like that, it didn't influence the whole family's timeline. It only affected ours. And then I invested my time in the children. I went to women's Bible studies during the week. I took the kids to VBS during the summer. But that were daytime ones, when it affected the family time, he would acquiesce to go. And then I had to not be critical of how he did it. I had to accept that the best he could do was show up and drive the car with an extreme amount of road rage happening and not judge that.
This is my brother, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pastor.
Yeah, he is now.
Those are beautiful answers. And that's like, I mean, for me, that's gold. Gold that, I think it's in Titus where it says, and you don't punch me. I think she might be okay with it, but in Titus it says that the older women should teach the younger women.
Mm-hmm.
You're not an older woman. You're not either.
I'm older than somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm older too.
Yeah. So that is podcast gold for women. And if you have more questions, I mean, this could be an entire podcast. Maybe sometime we'll do an entire podcast just on the role of men and women. I think that's coming because presently we're in the 1 Corinthians series, and I've actually been reading books about one particular chapter that I know is going to cause some heartache for some folks.
Yeah.
But we want to be faithful to God and not be afraid. We're not going to be ruled by fear. So those are good. Do you have anything else on that you want to throw out there?
No, I get this question a lot from women, and I have sat across from tables from women with tears in their eyes of just, my husband doesn't love God, or he's not, he's actively running away from God, and I don't know how to submit. And so I think this is a great conversation to have with them, and just let them know that it's not easy, and it's but I know that you are God's daughter, and He sees you, and He's going to equip you to do the hard stuff and the dirt.
Yeah, and then in the midst of that hard stuff, be safe. Hard stuff doesn't mean that you get hurt.
Absolutely,
hard stuff doesn't mean you are abused. That you're doing things you don't want to do, that you're being called into sin.
Good.
You don't have to do that.
You don't have
that
to
is
submit
not
to that.
submission.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
That is doormat, and God does not want His daughters to be doormats.
Right. I'm thinking of situations, and I'm sure you've got faces flashing through your mind where you and Tim and myself have counseled persons that are like, I'm in an abusive relationship, but God says He doesn't want me to divorce. And we're like in that awkward position of, well, first of all, can we send an Old Testament fight club after that guy? Because that's the worst. And just the painful reality of, wow, this guy's being unfaithful to you.
Right.
He's choosing this over this. He's doing these things, and they become a doormat.
Yeah.
And that's not what God's calling you to when He says be a submissive wife.
No.
Or to submit to one another.
Yeah, and so if you have a specific question, like these are general guidelines, but find a godly woman that you trust and ask her for your specifics. 'Cause these are general, but if they don't fit your situation or you still have questions, get specific answers for who you are.
And can they ask you to?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. So just look for 2 blondes and a preacher in the lobby, and we'll direct you which way we're going. Okay, next question. Wow, that was about a half an hour, but that's all right because that is so important. So let's look at number 3 where it says, why do such horrible things continue to happen to the same Christian, but others may have no loss at all?
The first thing I would say is we never know what someone else's struggle is. And just like there's sin is sin is sin, pain is pain is pain. And so comparison is a very dangerous place to be. God knows God loves all the people. There's Job. I don't understand. So what else do you have, Rachel?
Yeah, and I think the timeline. So if you're kind of getting pummeled with arrows and life being thrown at you, you can look around. And I remember we found out that Jenny had like a tumor in her lung when she was in my belly. And I remember just how odd it was to look outside and see people still going on walks. And it was sunny and beautiful. And it was just surreal to me. And so I think we all go through things and through different, I'm going to say the word seasons, sorry.
No, season's fine.
Yeah.
I'm in a season.
Of where people experience hard things. And I think what's important is to be in community with one another. And the reason why we're not all going through the hard things at the same time is because we can rely on each other to carry each other's burdens as far as the cross and to be there for those. So if everybody was going through a hard time through loss or through life, then who would be there to tend to be their brother's keeper?
That is an outrageously cool thought. I never would have structured the answer to that question that way. Mine would have been very black and white. Well, look at Job. There's always someone worse than you. But say that again. You're saying the way God has structured the body or us in relationship,
right?
That if we were all going through bad things at the same time, I think what I heard you say is he provides others that can lift up, encourage, support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's not about, well, why aren't they going through? They will go through their hard, right? And perhaps through those valleys and through those fires that we have to walk through, God equips us. He teaches us. Blessed are those who mourn. We see the Father in such a way and in such a depth that we don't always get to see and meet Him in the high peaks and valleys, or the high peaks of the mountains. And so through those hard times, we get to see Him more and more clearly, and in the depth of an understanding. So when we see our brother or sister walking behind us who happen to have to go through the same valley that we just walked through, we can give them encouragement and prayer and specific needs that we never would have known that we needed, but that we can give to them in their time. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking, because the why question is such a big question, and it's true, but it's hard to accept. Because a man who you may or may not be married to said a long time ago, we are not God. And that has been our primary concern since the garden.
Amen.
Right? And so I don't understand why God allows and what He doesn't allow, and why, I had someone just ask this question of me after a service recently. And the question was couched in, well, I've been praying for a brother to be delivered of alcoholism. Why hasn't He answered that prayer? And, I was doing my best to be pastoral, because that's not always the easiest thing for me. But the first thing that came out of my mouth is, well, because your brother's a free agent.
Right.
He has a say. And so it doesn't mean that God's not working. It doesn't mean that God's not prompting or prodding or with our kids, one of the hardest things to pray is, God, do whatever you have to my child to get their attention, and give me the grace to accept it, right? I mean, if we really believe the Bible, we really believe in this God, and we believe that He is good, and that the only way to life is a saving relationship through Jesus Christ, then God, do whatever you have to do. But when you're in that moment, it's sometimes the why is so hard. And it's like, you've got my attention. How much more of my attention do you need? I mean, honestly, that's how I felt, because it's like when we had our first child, I realized how selfish that I was. Now, I first realized that when I got married. It's like, oh, I'm pretty selfish. Okay, now I'm not selfish. Now we're ready to have a baby. Then we had a baby, and it's like, I'm still selfish. Then we had 3, and it's like, okay, I get it. All right, now I'm not selfish. Then we had 4, and it's like, are you kidding me? And then we had 5, and it's like, surrender. So it's God's got a purpose and a plan, and to always try to figure out that purpose and plan, it's gonna, I think many times just take us off on the wrong track.
Yeah.
And we're not burying our heads in the sand. I think it's how we respond is more important, which is what I like what you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was Rachel's answer was beautiful. I want to comment on that. Pray, God, whatever it takes to get my child's attention. I prayed that once and one of my children tried to take their life.
Wow.
And so now I say, that is the desire of my heart, but I can't say those words, God.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah.
And so that is a very courageous prayer. And that is the desire of my heart, that my children will know God. I just don't want to feel responsible for their consequences.
Right. Oh my. Yeah, that's a deep one. So, okay, let's look at 4, because this might have something to do with marriages, maybe motherhood, the heart of a woman, maybe a single woman. But it says, what part of the Bible will help me for more faith in forgiveness? Like, if God can forgive me, why is it so hard for me to forgive?
You're not God. I mean, forgiveness takes practice. Forgiveness always requires a sacrifice. I might be right, and I can still own the fact that I'm not enjoying the conflict, that I'm not enjoying the pain you're in. I'm not, and so I might need to give up my right to be right. And when I'm not submitting, back to question 1, to others out of reverence for Christ, then I'm not a very good forgiver.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, is forgiveness hard for you?
Yes, it is. But I also know what it invites when we have unforgiveness in our heart. It's the hardness of hearts, the bitterness creeps in, and it affects my relationship with God. And so when I have unforgiveness in my heart, this gets not separated, but it just gets really messy because my heart is too hard. And so some things that God has taught me, though, through forgiveness is to just kind of see it from a different perspective, rather than I can feel the hurt, I can feel the betrayal, I can feel all of the feelings. But if I step outside of my feelings and I can see it for what it is somebody who needs grace and somebody who needs mercy, just like I need grace and I need mercy. And I'm always reminded of Jesus is sitting there on the cross and forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They're literally beating him, and whipping him or whatever. And but he can see them for the souls that they are, the images that they were created in the image of God, and still see that there is hope for them and that there is that love poured over them. And so God's just showed me that just to take a step back from my feelings and see them for the sinners that they are, because I am too. So.
That's I like that both of you said that forgiveness, I'm paraphrasing here, isn't easy.
Right.
I'm thinking of a time when you were hurt by a woman, and it totally, I think your words, derailed you. Like, you had to leave the house, you were driving around, you were trying to figure out what's going to happen. But then and that's the difficulty, and that's the pain, that's the hurt, that's the betrayal. It was public. It was said in front of other women. You're trying to be a leader. And what I watched is you went to, what does the Bible say? You went to Matthew 18, and you went to that person direct. And it wasn't with vindictive, you did it. And it's turned in, I think, from what you've told me, what others on staff have told me, have turned into a beautiful relationship with this person. But it couldn't start if you had the knives out from the beginning.
Right.
So without giving the specifics, was that accurate? I mean, can you correct that or give us more insight into that?
Yeah. So the conversation, I went directly to them. I'm like, okay, because there were, I don't know
details are important. Details. Yeah.
But to go directly to them, was this a misunderstanding, or I want to know your heart behind it? And so I gave them an opportunity to talk about, I didn't mean it that way, and all of that. So just kind of seeing it from their perspective and just setting it straight, like what reality was and what was really going on. And then there was an apology, and then it was just like, okay, cool. Well, next time I see you, like, it's going to be just completely normal.
Let's not be weird.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be weird.
So the first part in getting there, I mean, it wasn't the forgiving part once you followed God's plan for that.
Right.
But getting there was difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, I was pretty upset.
Mm-hmm.
So Ephesians chapter 4, because I actually saw this in advance and I looked this up. There were two things. In Ephesians chapter 4, we're told, and that's not easy to do, Ephesians 4:32, because they ask what part of the Bible, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. That's what you were referring to, Heidi. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I think I've referred to this before, probably in sermons, maybe on the podcast. I heard of a Ugandan pastor who, after the genocide, where the two warring tribes, I think the Hutus and the Tutsis or something like that, and they were butchering each other in this. Well, one tribe was butchering the other tribe. A pastor from the butchered tribe, the one that was just getting slaughtered in the streets, and men, women, children, limbs, bodies being thrown to alligators. I mean, just the worst, before finally the world stepped in and put a stop to it, right? For years, he couldn't pray the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't, because his own salvation, I mean, think about that prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. And Lord, forgive me the way I forgive others. He couldn't pray it because he wasn't there yet. And so, just as in Christ, God forgave you, you said something, why is it so hard to forgive? You said, because we're not God. And I agree in one sense with that, is now God can forgive. Now God can forgive. But it costs God to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
He had to crush the most perfect person who's ever lived. He had to crush Jesus in order to be able to forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not make the in the sense of that it costs God nothing. He just forgives. He's just this benevolent grandpa that lets the kids hang from the chandeliers and blow up the kitchen. No, that's not it at all.
No.
He something had to die, not just die, but be punished, tortured, bleed, mocked, humiliated, betrayed, shamed, denied, in order for him to forgive me. So of course forgiveness. I mean, this is the first time I'm processing it this way, and you guys are here, so let's just do this. You're part of my sermon prep right now. Is it was hard for God to forgive. It was hard for Jesus to forgive. He had to die in order. Somewhere that pain's got to go somewhere. It just doesn't go out into the void. Forgive and forget. Move on. No, there's going to be pain in forgiveness, and it costs God
a lot.
Yeah. So, you got any more thoughts on that, or are you ready for the next one? Next.
I'm good.
Next. Okay, this is obviously the heart of at least to me, it's a heart of a mom, or sister, or a grandmom. It says, if children got saved and baptized, as a child, and went to church as a family, and then they turned 18, they stopped going to church. Now they say they're going to heaven and they don't need to go to church. Do you think they're saved?
So if it was my child, yes, I do. I think they do because that keeps me happy.
Yeah.
But also, I know my own journey. I know I was saved. My salvation experience was in 7th grade, and I went on to make really poor decisions through my college and young adult years. And I do believe if I had met Christ at the end of my days, during those days, that I would have stood before him and gone, oh, yeah. He would have said, you are mine, and I would have been ashamed that I hadn't done it better. But I do believe with all my heart that I was his from that moment. I just wasn't his best example at the moment.
Yeah, so from your own journey.
Yeah.
And I liked how you said, if they're mine, then yes, because it makes me feel better.
Yes.
Because that's honest.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is obviously someone who fears that there's fear, and it begs the bigger question of, this eternal security question, which I think we did on Questions Men Ask part 2 or 3. I'm not sure which one, but yeah, this is a difficult one when you watch your kids. I don't know, Rachel, what do you think?
I think we just have to go back to what God said. He who begins a good work will complete it. And so our journey, just like we all have our journeys, we can look back and see all of the dumb things that we did and we went left when we should have gone right. And but God was there and He's sovereign. So He's over it all, and He can teach you through the hard lessons. And maybe this is just kind of what your child is, whether to say if they're saved or not, that's between, I think, them and the Lord, but I think oftentimes as mothers and as parents that we hold on to our kids like this, like these are my kids.
Good.
And a lot of the times is just, no, I'm a steward over your child. And so, and they happen to be my favorite of God's children, because they're mine, but I mentioned earlier about like Jenny having a tumor in her lung, and we didn't know the outcome. She was still in my belly, and we had to go every week to just monitor this, the size of this tumor. And so, but I got to a point where I lost my voice, and like we found out, and I lost my voice, and I couldn't talk outward to everybody and process it, so I had to process it upward, and I just told God, okay, well, I will love this child for as long as you give her to me. And I didn't know how long that would be. And here she is, 10 years old. But these children belong to the Lord. And we just get to steward over them for a while. And so I think that if we see them running away, it breaks our heart, or if we see them going down the wrong path. But we also know the power of who Jesus Christ is and who He says and what He will do for them. And that we have to stand on His promises of what He says He's going to do. So, just like He was able to save us from ourselves.
Right. And what a great price He paid for us. And God is a loving God, and He loves my children more than I do.
Yes.
Hey, that's the truth. Yeah. That's a great little nugget, that He loves your kids more than you do, more than we do. He loves my kids more than I do. And I think we've established only God knows. I mean, that person can know. I mean, we can be secure in our own salvation. We can have assurance. And so it's really between that person and God. I am comforted by, what the Bible teaches us about, no one can snatch them from my hand. And what it says in Ephesians, that we're sealed and that we've been adopted, and that adoption isn't taken away. In fact, when Tim and I sat here and talked about your children, I used your son, one of your sons, as an example, the adopted one, that he's no less a child than the rest of them that you bore in your body, right? And how much more so with God. So security in Christ, or security of salvation, is a result of God keeping us, and it's not us maintaining our salvation. But
say that again.
Yeah, so I stole this from gotquestions.org.
Okay.
Yeah. Security in salvation is a result of God keeping us, not in us maintaining our own salvation. And so with that, it is a journey, it is a process. Would you speak, how would you encourage this woman to pray for I gave it away, at least one of them. What can they do in regards? Because we've talked about how, the propensity of Adam is passivity. The propensity of mom or Eve, how do I take control, desire that place? And that's not always bad. There's a time and a place for a woman to take responsibility, leadership, and control. But how should she respond with this adult child that I'm no longer, I'm a steward of the relationship, but now they're not, I'm not in charge of diapers and juicy cups, and schedules and football practice. How do I, what do I do? Give me something to do. I'm a woman. I've got a child, an adult child that I'm, my heart's burning for. What do I do?
So I think keeping our relationship is really important. I've had the conversation with a couple of my children to say, I'm not going to make you go to church anymore. I did my job. Your relationship is between you and God. That's your responsibility.
I bet you that's a hard combo to happen.
Yeah. There's a lot of hard convo.
Do you ever the play, but on Mother's Day, would you come with me?
Well, and actually, so the kids used to come to Christmas Eve service with us. And back in the day, Christmas Eve was always taking communion. And I finally said to my kids, if communion isn't meaningful to you, I don't want to be the reason you come and take communion with your heart not right toward God. So even that, Christmas and Easter, if they're in town and they're around and they want to come. But sometimes they have said, we will come if you want us to. And I said, you can come if you want to. Don't come because I made you. And I want it to be their decision.
You want it to be theirs.
Yeah.
And authentic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna revert back to love. That's my whole being, right? So just love them, and don't. It doesn't mean you have to stop believing what you believe in, or just if you pray in your house and they come over for dinner, continue to pray. For over the meal, and just continue walking on your walk. Just love them through it, and then I just definitely pray for them and be there. That sometimes when they fall, that they know that they can always come home, and you'll be there.
I love that.
Excited and
yes,
just like the parable or the prodigal son, right?
Right.
You're gonna have joy in your face of come back home anytime. You're always welcome.
So I'm not going to criticize any story that Jesus told.
No.
Okay, and that's one of the most perfect stories of the gospel
Mm-hmm.
ever, the prodigal son. But and there's also debate, was this a real story? Was it a parable?
Mm-hmm.
Because Jesus began the story by saying there once was a man with two sons.
Mm-hmm.
And he's speaking to a patriarchal society. He's speaking in relationship. I mean, it's obvious that the man in the story represents God the Father, but scholars don't know for sure. Did this really happen?
Mm-hmm.
Was this a real story? Because he says there once was a man with two sons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even in a parable, you would say there once was a man with two sons. If it's a real story, when we get to heaven, we have time in the movie room.
Mm.
I honestly want to know what the role of mom was.
Mm.
Was mom there? Was he a widower?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a mom? Was she waiting too?
Mm-hmm.
Was she the kind of mom that was like, that older son was the favorite,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe, kind of like
Right.
with the whole
Old
Jacob and
Testament
Esau
wives.
thing.
Yeah.
It's just like I have so many questions. We need more details, more than Tim Keller gave us in The Prodigal God. So
Right.
that was just a random thought. Is I wonder what the role of mom was
Mm-hmm.
with this son that took half the inheritance and took off.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she was pulling the strings. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. He'll tell us. So.
Yeah.
Good. So next question. This is a little bit easier. We can take a breath. And I don't care. We can all weigh in. I want to know from Heidi. I want to know from Rachel if our world's greatest executive producer, Benjamin, wants to weigh in. This question is from a great lady, I can tell. It just says Chick-fil-A or Five Guys? Chick-fil-A, Jesus Chicken, or Five Guys, which you still have to drive at least an hour and a half to get.
It says chick. That's my favorite.
Well played. Well played. Because of the chick in the Chick-fil-A, you're going with Chick-fil-A.
Yes. And I've had Five Guys. Greasy burgers are greasy burgers. Sorry. It might be sacrilege.
You just made my mouth water when you said that, though. Yeah, just a little bit.
I know. Like, would it be wrong if I said Five Guys? Or
No, it's not going to be wrong.
I'm just kind of disappointed there's not anything about tacos and Mexican.
Tacos and Mexican. Tacos or Mexican.
Well, you can add that.
Okay, yeah, then I'd go with Taco Bout It in Manistee.
Ooh, there you go, Taco
we had
Bout
some
It.
of that yesterday
Yeah.
at the all staff. Yeah, that was
take
pretty
that.
good. Benjamin, you got a preference? Chick-fil-A or Five Guys? No preference. He shook his head. You can't see him. He's off camera. I'm going to say both because people have tried to pin me down on this.
Mm-hmm.
And Chick-fil-A is obviously, I've probably had more Chick-fil-A this year.
Mhm.
One, because it's in Traverse City now, which is only about a 20-minute drive. Two, because my daughter works there.
Mhm.
And so it's so easy to drop off and pick up, get some of those nuggets. You know,
Mhm.
I love tacos too.
Mm.
I love,
Mhm.
but if it's a Chick-fil-A or Five Guys, my answer is both.
That's fair.
And I lobbied for a Chick-fil-A in Traverse City forever,
Mhm.
and we've got one.
Mhm.
And now my lobbying is now thrown over to Five Guys because I have to go to Gaylord,
Oh, yeah.
or if you're not from Michigan, Gaylord, but it's Gaylord, right? You have to go there to get a Five Guys or Grand Rapids, and I
Mhm.
love that greasy burger.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, the
down.
girl from Idaho has to judge the fries on either of them, so I'm going to go with the Chick-fil-A, the waffle
Really?
fries.
You like
yeah.
the waffles better?
Mhm.
See,
Yeah.
what I love about the Five Guys is it's just an exorbitant amount of fries. So they
Mhm.
overfill the thing, and then they take one more scoop and dump it in the bag.
That's true.
That's their MO.
Mhm.
So if you get a large fry,
Mhm.
the four of us could not complete a large fry. Forget about it. It's just, it's 2 minutes. You would go in a potato overload. And there are a ton of
The
them.
food of my people.
The food of your people, the Idaho people. All right, that's a good one. All right, next one. And I'm going to read it just the way it was written.
Okay.
Why do biblical men pressure women?
Well, we did this one. Shall we say it together?
Mhm.
Biblical men don't.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
I missed I
One,
missed
two,
the
three.
cue.
Biblical men don't.
Yeah, that's an
Yeah.
easy one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to flesh that out a little bit. I don't know what
Yeah.
they're pressuring about. I can make assumptions what they're pressuring about, but go.
Yeah. I guess, and right, I don't know who wrote the question or whatever, or what they were thinking. And I'm guessing it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about submission. And so I guess they would be pressuring you to submit in a way that's not honoring to a daughter of Christ.
Hmm.
If it feels like pressure, then it's not from God.
Right.
I mean,
And they may or may not be married too.
right,
Mhm.
This may be
right.
like, I'm thinking about, I have 4 daughters,
Mhm.
and thankfully they're all pretty strong,
Mhm.
like their mother. There's
Mhm.
not a whole lot of pressuring there.
Yes.
But there can be some crazy pressure
Mhm.
put on men over women even outside of marriage.
Mhm.
And you're saying that's not a biblical man.
No. And there, where we had talked earlier about biblical, I would even say that may be someone who's using scripture inappropriately.
Yeah.
But if it's a godly man, you're not going to be pressured.
Right.
In a
Right.
human relationship, there shouldn't be pressure.
Right.
But I think also, I'm just thinking of my son, and just wondering, we're doing our best to have him be a biblical man or a man after God's own heart. And,
Mhm.
but that's between him and the Lord, right? And so, I think there is a pressure for men to kind of, do what society's telling them to. And so you'll have that in the church and
Mhm.
outside of the church. And so, but I think that instead of worrying about like the man, then we just worry about ourselves of like, well, no, I'm a woman of valor and I know what God has called me to do and to be able to just
Push back.
and just be like,
Mhm.
nope.
That's
Mhm.
good.
Yeah.
And that's okay,
Mhm.
especially if the way you're being pressured is unbiblical.
Mhm.
Not just the pressuring, but what you're being pressured to do,
Mhm.
to participate in, to not do.
Mhm.
And so,
Well, and I always ask Darcy how she's taught your girls because I've sat with your girls through youth group, and I have wondered, man, these girls they know what they believe, they know what they want, and they're not going to settle. And so I've learned from the ones that have walked before me.
Mhm.
How did you teach them, what to stand for and what to stand up for or for themselves and to give them a voice? And so I think it's important that as the older teaches the younger, we can learn from each other. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that about your girls. Sure.
yeah, I don't know how we've been blessed that way. I
Mhm.
have to credit my wife for a lot of that.
Mhm.
And I would just say if you're in a dating relationship with a man who's claiming to be biblical and he's pressuring you, like maybe not go to the extreme that I would want to start with, but maybe start with the standing up and saying, no, this isn't right. And if it continues and he doesn't repent
Mm-hmm.
and change, I mean, even with what you were saying is like, if you're such a biblical dude, why are you pressuring me?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I have a relationship with God. And so if you start there and it doesn't work, especially in a dating relationship, get out of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The whole don't settle thing is a really important thing to hear,
Yes.
because so many women settle.
Yeah.
It feels like, or it seems like there's
Yeah.
so many women that will say, yeah, but he's got a good job. Yeah, but I really like him. Yeah, but he's romantic. Or all these other areas. But the most important area is his relationship with God. And going back to something that you said is, hey, if this guy loves Jesus more than anything, and secondly, I would say, he loves me, okay, that's a good guy. That's a guy to love and trust and make a life with.
Mm-hmm.
But only if he loves Jesus more than you.
Yeah.
I mean, if at all possible, you want to be with a guy, marry a guy that loves Jesus more than he loves you, who fears Jesus more than he fears you. Because there's a certain amount of fear that goes on. There's a certain amount of fear that I have for my wife, Darcy, right? Hell hath no fury. Like, I've screwed up and or hurt her or betrayed her or made her feel that way, right? And so, we don't want to be in that position, because that just gives, that perpetuates the stereotype that with the very first question on this podcast about submission is, that's not what it looks like. That's not a man who's cherishing. That's not a man who is submitting to you and your needs and your desires out of reverence for Christ. He's all about himself. And so, there's something toxic going on there that we don't want to.
Yeah. And who's speaking into his life? I mean, if he loves Jesus more than you, or says he does, says he loves you, and you're members of a church, then go talk to somebody in the church, a married couple, and say, hey, look, this is, I mean, if you are wondering if you should stay in the relationship, then Titus 2 it up and go talk to some.
Titus 2 it up. That's a new one. Titus 2 it up. Yeah, you have to go look at Titus 2 to see what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Great job, ladies. Okay, we might have time for one or two more. I think we're right about an hour right now. And this is good. This just means you guys have to come back.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll have to arrange the schedules and all that kind of stuff and see if it's okay with producer guy. But so this is a, they're all heart. I don't want to say which ones are heartfelt or which ones not, but this one, I feel the pain of this woman who writes, my husband and I suffer from infertility. We eventually had to do IVF, and I had to look that up. In vitro fertilization, yes, with a donor egg. We have one child through this. Is IVF going against God's plan for us? I always struggle with if we went against his will. However, our daughter is the most amazing person I have met. Got thoughts on that? I had to look up a good answer for this one, but I want to hear you guys first. Go ahead, Rachel.
God is the creator of life. And we see in society right now, everyone's trying to build the best robot, and they still can't figure it out on how to give it a soul, because that is from God. And so because God is the creator of life, I think his plan is the baby, right? And so, or that she said that she had a daughter. And so, I just think God is the creator of life. And so if we are, well, what is his plan? I think IVF is in the same category of, I have a pacemaker, and it helps me, helps my heart keep beating, and, or all of the other things that we use to help us in this life. So that's my...
No, that's a great answer.
Yeah, God does medical miracles and sometimes works outside that. I think another point in this is, I believe donor egg means that it wasn't their own fertilized egg, but it was a stored egg. So if your conviction is that conception is the point where life begins, then that donor egg is a life waiting for potential. And God gives life, right? So IVF doesn't always work. So if you are taking an egg that might have sat in a cryptocariotic chamber somewhere for 1,000 years and giving it the opportunity to live and breathe, that seems like it matches God's opportunity to give life. He had the choice not to, and he did. He knit that child together in your womb.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I confessed I had to look up, wait, what's IVF real quick? And then it was like, oh yeah, okay, I know what they're talking about. The black and white answer is that the Bible doesn't address it. So it's a matter of your personal conviction of the Holy Spirit. But I love how both of you said that life begins at conception, and the moment that became a life, and God gave you that life, I would say celebrate that life. And so the struggle, I always struggle if we went against his will. Well, the fact is that he gave life.
Right.
And so what is the alternative? To go back and undo that?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the person, it's like, oh, my first marriage failed and I divorced him or her for all the wrong reasons, and now I'm married to someone else. And now it's like, oh, now I'm a Christian and I understand kind of what the Bible lays down as the principles for what's a rightful divorce and a wrongful divorce. Well, I don't divorce the person that I'm with now and go back to the first one because I screwed it up and now I know better. It's like, no, where you are now, stay there.
Yeah.
So you've been given this life, you've made the decision, and I hate to be this way, but what's done is done. So celebrate what God has given, give him the glory, and trust that there's grace.
Yeah.
Because there's some people that are going to have very strong convictions one way or another about wisdom issues. And when the Bible was written, it's not that God didn't know that IVF would be a real thing,
right?
But it's a wisdom issue. And so you have to pray and ask God. And it sounds like whoever this person is, there was a lot of prayer that went into it.
Yes.
And so you just have to trust God for that.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go backwards because now, we have a child. And so I guess God's will is that you would raise that child in the fear of the Lord,
right?
And that you would love your husband and love your child and be the best disciple keep giving him your yes.
Yeah. I like that you use the word celebrate what the outcome of your steps were. Because if I'm continuing to struggle with something that's this many years down the line, what could I do that would be more honorable to God with that energy? Instead of struggle, celebrate. I'm glad you said that word.
So the wisdom is and I'm asking, so if they prayed about it and they just no, don't do it, and then they do it, then is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
To him,
right.
To him it is sin. Is that the same? Okay.
But
right.
God can use evil for good.
God can use evil for good. And so, this is the case of, and I, just to be blunt, I mean, there are more than one couple or family in our church where child number 1 or 2, sometimes 3, were conceived out of wedlock. Or these are my kids from a prior, and these are her kids from a prior, and now we're all together. And it's like, in the new covenant and the God of grace, a child conceived in sin, there's no curse on that child.
No.
There are consequences. If your children were 16, 14, and 10 when mom and dad decided to get married, there will be natural consequences because they remember that.
Right.
If it's like, oh, she's pregnant, and then they decided to get married, the consequences will be different. And I'm not trying to mitigate. One sin is worse than another. There's always consequences. But as far as this child, being and this isn't the words that they use. There's no sort of curse on that child. It's why I chose the word, let's celebrate this life. This is where we are now. It said in 1 Corinthians, wherever you are now, stay there. You did the best with the tools that you have.
Yeah.
How do we filter these decisions that aren't specifically spelled out in the Bible? We start with the Bible. Does it forbid it? There's nothing in the Bible that forbids IVF.
Right.
So they went to the next one, which is the conscience or the Holy Spirit speaking through my conscience. Then if it's still not, is it loving to God? Is it loving to others? Well, man, I want a child that I can love and a fertilized egg that I can rescue. Then, and I'm sure there's probably a some scholar or scholars on both sides that major in ethics that could war this better than us, but we're just simple disciples doing the best that we can.
Right.
So I think some of these, I love what you said is there's a life and God gave life and he's the giver of life. So there's no life that's a mistake.
Right.
There's and this begs a whole rat's nest of just gross questions like what about a child conceived in rape? What about a child, which is rare, but does happen, or a child conceived in incest? I'm thinking of someone that I know that I care about very deeply, that he and his wife adopted a child conceived in incest, and what a beautiful child, and there's been no developmental, all the weird kind of stereotype things that we throw out there. But the family where this was conceived could not look upon that shame. And they're infertile. And they've welcomed this child who has a beautiful relationship with Jesus. And it's like, wow, God redeems evil for good.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah. You got time for a few more? I don't know. Do you guys have things to do? You have responsibilities probably more than your husbands do.
My kids already had their appointments this morning, so I'm good.
I'm going to open up a can with the last one.
Okay.
And it just goes like this. If God made sex, number 22 is the question. If God made sex, why are women and men so mismatched in libido? Inquiring minds want to know.
Well, first of all, yes, God made sex. Let's
Okay,
just
good.
leave the if out. God made sex.
Yes. He wasn't surprised. He's not hiding his eyes.
Look what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And not all men and women are mismatched in libido.
Good.
There can be physiological reasons. Someone's libido is different. Medical science can help with that. Counseling can help with that. The book that you recommended to me, now I can't think of the order of the words, The Great Sex Rescue.
Yes.
That author actually has a suggestion why this might be that, and she's referring to often women take a while to warm up. Well, what a woman, so intimacy, as you mentioned in our sermons, are physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so for a woman, before you're married, and if you're not having intercourse, you might do a lot of other things and spend a lot more time warming up. And once you're married, you don't have to warm up, apparently. The rules change. But if you warm up, the results will be more pleasing to both more often, but not always. That's what this author's research showed.
Interesting.
And what she postulated.
Yeah.
But I would say not everybody's is.
Right.
And so there could be some very specific answers that we can't give here, but we can talk about generally. What do you got?
I think it's, I don't know.
Like, why did I have to get to that question?
No, I'm totally fine with the question. I just want to know, just make sure that my filter is on. I think that the libido, a lot of it has to do with safety too, as with a woman. It is, and I think men too. It's body, heart, soul. It's all of that. But from what I understand, it's a lot more physical for the man. It's got to be mental and emotional as well. For generally speaking, there's always different cases and stuff. But I think if the woman feels safe and loved, and the intimacy that's happening outside of the bedroom, that allows the opportunity for the physical. I mean, the physical connection, I think.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah. And so we go back, and I'm glad you corrected the question. But the if God, no, God did make, the why question again comes up, whether it's about evil or it's about sex and marriage, right? The why are, generally speaking, and like you said, it can go both ways. I mean, there more than one, or I don't know what percentage, you would know more than I would coming out of the therapy world, where the woman's libido is higher than the man's. But why is there? It's almost like, why is it difficult to put the Jenga puzzle of physical, emotional, and spiritual intimacy to get on the same page? And for me, I guess if I had to speculate, I'm not God, but if I had to speculate, I think it's because God wanted us to pursue one another.
Yeah.
You know, did God allow that? Now, I think it's a lot more difficult after the fall, and it's a lot more difficult with culture. And the older I get and the longer I've been married, the more I realize most of what I watched, television and movies, and I'm not even talking R-rated, I'm talking Little House on the Prairie. I mean, Pa Ingalls and Caroline Ingalls, that wasn't real. That wasn't real, because I grew up thinking that the image of womanhood and what a wife was Caroline Ingalls, right? And what Hollywood puts in shorthand or in books or what have you catches the best moments and many times misses the worst moments. And there's something in this human experience in a fallen world that drives us to pursue one another. You know, I'm strictly thinking from a man perspective. If my wife responded the exact same way that I do, libido-wise, I probably wouldn't pursue her as I should or ought, spiritually and emotionally,
Right.
and vice versa. So and that's not always true. There's times I'm pursuing and she's not, and there's times she's pursuing and I'm not. But I wonder, and that's complete speculation, is again the whys of God are above our pay grade. But I know that it's something that He has given as a gift.
Yeah.
Intimacy in general, not just the physical, but the emotional and the spiritual. And when we're pursuing all three, it ain't always easy.
Right. Well,
You know?
and to be good at anything takes practice.
Right.
So practice
And
in
we're
a married
not just talking
relationship.
about the bedroom, because some dudes out there going, yeah, Heidi said practice. You need to listen to podcast. What was that, 77? You know, and make sure you listen to the end. No, we're talking about all three.
And so one of the, like, there's great resources out there, like the Great Sex Rescue, that tell you how to practice, like just touching, not going any further, just talking, not just praying. Practice includes burpees and running distance and sprints, not just one or the other.
You just dipped into that other degree you have.
Yeah.
Well played.
And the intimacy that we have with our spouses is unlike anyone else on this planet. Like, nobody will know me at the depth that Bo knows me, or nobody will know him at the depths that I know him. And so the intimacy is not just, it's physical, but it's the celebration of what God has done in our marriage, of celebrating not just Bo and not just me, but our union together. It's important to see it as a celebration. Well, it's important. I'm not shitting on anybody, but it is a celebration. And to be, I think it's at the heart of every person is to be fully known, and not just fully known and fully seen, but fully loved too. Yeah. And so Bo has seen my very, very best in a way that nobody else will see, but he's also seen my very, very worst in the way that no one else will see. And so, but through all of that, he still chooses to love me and to connect with me, and to the two shall become one flesh. We truly are in this life together, just celebrating each other and the union that God has ordained and blessed while we're here. And so I think it's important that it's not just physical, but the physical is a way that, I'm going to be really girly here.
No, that's fine. You're a girl. Please do.
The way that our souls can dance, like the closest that we can get together, and in a way that I will never with anyone else, that our souls are dancing, and that sounds so weird.
No, that's actually good.
Beautiful.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, through experience, through conversations, through stuff that I've read, so many times the bedroom is a battleground. And it's not meant to be a battleground. But the world tries to tell us that it's a playground. I don't think it's supposed to be a playground either. Not that there's not play. I'm not talking about play, but when I think of playground, it's like recess, blah, and just kind of, and it is meant to be a dance floor. I mean, it is more because you got to have two, and it's got to be mutual, and at the wedding reception, sometimes Darcy doesn't want to dance to that song. But I don't want to dance with anybody but her, and so, but she will,
for that one song, right?
For that one song. There's one song that she'll dance with me to, and I'm okay with it because I realized, for the longest time, it's like, well, when she met me, I was Mr. Dancer guy, and she was like, well, I just dance to slow songs or whatever, and she's going to kill me for talking about this, but you both know Darcy, so you defend me, please, right? I realized I don't like dancing that much. That that there was a reason that I was a dancer, and now that God's given me this beautiful force of nature, I don't really like. I'm not talking about libido now. I'm talking literally about dancing. It's like I didn't like dancing that much, and it's like she's the only one I really want to dance with. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about dance with my daughters. That's different, but she's the one I want to dance with, and so I just wonder if I loved how you said that that pursuit that makes our souls dance, right? That's what we're pursuing. We're pursuing intimacy, like you said, Heidi, and that's that three-legged stool. It's spiritual and it's emotional and physical, and it isn't meant to be a battleground. And yeah,
and I guess because you said we're women and we're more thoughtful about who might have written the question, I'm gonna put that hat on.
Yeah,
I didn't go the right way, but so if the dance isn't good for you, if it's uncomfortable, if it's a stumbling block in your relationship, it's okay to get help. Sometimes there's medical reasons that you can't dance. Sometimes there's
trauma.
And then that's part of the intimacy, is to be able to be able to be vulnerable and say, we're not making this work together. Let's take each other someplace for support. Let's reach out. Let's not settle for an unused dance floor.
Let's dance together. Yeah. So don't suffer in silence.
Right.
Let's get some help. You can read books. You can talk to people.
Right.
You can talk to, please, if you're a woman that wrote that question, don't come talk to me.
No.
Because
come talk to we.
Talk to them. And that's just being appropriate in who you're seeking
exactly
your information from. Find a godly woman, like you said, Titus to that thing, Titus to that question. And so,
yeah, but don't settle for less.
Right.
Either he or she. Don't settle for less.
And don't think you're broken, too.
Right, you're not broken. Fight for it. Yeah, you're not broken.
Right.
Because that is the message that women get that are in that situation of there's something wrong with me. I don't measure up, and then maybe on our next one we can even address some of those other questions. Is when it doesn't match up, and then he goes and wanders. The whole idea of I'm broken. This is my fault,
right?
And then maybe it's a not a biblical man pressuring a woman or speaking lies right over her. So
yeah.
This was good.
Yeah.
Not too painful, I'm sure. A little painful, maybe right over there. Right. I wish you'd rather be in another
Benjamin
room.
Benjamin is very brave.
Yeah, he's a brave man. He's a brave man. But so we'd love to have you back. We'll have to do a part 2. Maybe we'll get to some other ones. I'm starting to think that maybe with some of these questions that could be a man or a woman, we might have to just have a new segment called Questions People Ask.
Yep.
Like one of our questions is what or when was Judges written? That's not specific to a man or woman. We'll go look that up because I looked it up once and I've already forgotten it.
Right. Something BC.
1068.
Yeah, something.
I think that's what you said.
I think it was 1068 between 1000 BC.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in there. It's generally speaking.
It's numbers.
Yeah. But ladies, thanks for sharing your wisdom, your heart. The Spirit is in you. And so we're going to trust that God's Spirit will use this as encouragement and support to those men and women. I should have said women and men and students that listen to this podcast. We have students too that are listening. It's crazy. But Tab family, thank you for It's about an hour and a half. If you've made it to the end, well done. And share this podcast if it's helpful to you. Get your spouse to listen to it if he or she needs to hear something. Like it, unlike it, like it again. Or no, subscribe to it, unsubscribe, and subscribe again because algorithms are real. Enjoy Chick-fil-A, Five Guys, we don't care.
And talk about it.
Talk about it. Oh, if you're in Manistee, get some taco about it. I had it twice in 7 days.
Ooh.
And that wasn't even on purpose.
Lucky.
And yeah,
lucky man.
It was fantastic. So, but Rachel, Heidi, thank you so much for being here. And until next time, Tab family, this is John, Rachel, Heidi, and Benjamin signing off.